This is Harvard on the Map, presented by the Harvard Graduate School of Design, covering innovative ideas and thought leaders in digital cartography, Earth observation, and all things geospatial, with your host, Jennifer Horowitz.
Hello, and welcome to Harvard on the Map. I'm here with Mel Imfeld, who is a senior map designer at Mapbox, and I'm so excited to talk with her today. Thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having me. Really excited to be here.
Yeah, so first to start, what does a map designer at Mapbox look like? I feel like they are truly the paragon of map design, at least within the geospatial world. Maybe Esri, maybe a couple others, but I think of Mapbox is just so beautiful visually. What is being a map designer at Mapbox look like for you?
So yeah, it's a good question. I think it looks very differently for, who you'd ask. I think every sort of map designer has their own sort of, specialities and their expertises. I think for me in particular, it means sort of like two things. So on one hand, I do a lot of like base map design. So you might be familiar with the map templates that Mapbox gives to people who are interested in making a map. So we have these various templates that you can pull into our in-browser tool called Studio, which is kind of like, I guess, an InDesign for maps if you want. Some people call it Photoshop for maps. I think it's more InDesign. But essentially it's this tool where you can like pull in a base map style, and you can sort of take this as your basis and continue tweaking it. And we're already sort of preparing it in a way so that it's kind of, for a specific use case, and then it kind of already looks beautiful with a lot of like special things and tweaking that we do. So that's one thing that I do as a map designer at Mapbox. And the other thing, which is increasingly important, is I do a lot of map design for in-vehicle navigation. So I work with a lot of automotive customers and really help them make really performant but also really useful maps when you're navigating in your car. So yeah, those I'd say are my two kind of expertise areas right now as map designer.
Fascinating. And how did you get involved? You mentioned your speciality is in-vehicle navigation. How did you get involved with that to begin with?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think really more coincidentally. I can tell you a bit about my background.
Yeah,
so
please.
I don't originally a automotive specialist at all. I started as an urban planner and an architect. That's what I studied back when I was in Switzerland, where I'm also from. And I definitely had an interest in sort of like large scale urban problems. I had an interest in mobility. So, kind of like using data to infer interesting things about how, I guess, people move in space. So that was something that's definitely sort of, has always interested me, but I've done a ton of other things along the way. I worked as an urban designer. I worked as a consultant, kind of, unrelated to spatial topics, and then kind of, went full circle again and ended up in mapping, and in particular navigation, just because I think it's also just a really important topic when it comes to thinking of map as a product. So it's also a big, learning for me every day, kind of, learning from people who've been in that industry for a very long time, have a lot of knowledge, basically since, maps, web maps kind of have been out there. And a lot of learning for me as well, but very, very interesting field for sure.
Yeah, it's an interesting trajectory too, that you also came from. I'm technically within the School of Architecture, although it very much confuses, especially relatives who are older, it confuses them. Okay, she does sort of computer science, but it's within, mapping, but I came from architecture. It doesn't make sense. But anyways, the point is that I also, come from an architecture background. That's cool. Do you feel like your design background informs your work? So much of your portfolio is so visually beautiful. I was just stalking your portfolio this morning, and it's just, everything is just so colorful and beautiful and aesthetic. Do you think that their background informs a lot of your work within Mapbox?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think, it's been, I'm very grateful for my architectural education. I think
Yeah.
I've learned a lot of really valuable things. I'm sure you do too. Even um, I think, like the things that you now think are maybe you wouldn't think of as most relevant, like architectural history, for
Mm.
example. I mean, there's even in architectural history, there's sort of a long tradition of making data visualizations and maps and like all these techniques that exist around um, uh, mapping and visualizing information in space. So I think there are a lot of very valuable aspects about architecture, and I would probably do the same thing again. I think I did. Of course, there's also a whole other aspect that has to do with engineering and so on. But these are things you can always learn, and I think architecture is a great basis for many jobs, including map making for sure.
Agreed, 100%. So, I feel like I love Mapbox in part because I'm not really a celebrity person. I don't, follow, Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie, but I do follow Mapbox celebrities, yourself included, Johnny Walker. There's a Ukrainian Mapbox artist who does, and software engineer who does beautiful visualization. I'm forgetting his name.
Is it Vlad?
Yes, it's Vlad. Yes, Vlad. I love his
Yeah,
work
he's
on
brilliant.
Twitter. So do you feel like there's a community within Mapbox of designers who kind of learn and build from each other?
Yeah, for sure. I think this is also something that has, I'd say, drawn me to Mapbox very
Mm,
much. I think it's a particular type of person here
sure.
at Mapbox, or that is kind of drawn to that kind of environment. I think trying to think what would be the best characteristics to describe a typical Mapboxer. I think, very like self-driven for sure. I
Mm,
think, the culture here is like if there's something that interests you, you do it. So there's a lot of room to explore things that you're interested in. So in the map design team where I'm at, we have this really cool sort of like, I think it's quarterly. So it's called Hack Week, and it's a week where you can kind of do whatever you're interested in. So it has to be like loosely map related, but some really interesting work has kind of sprung out of that and has also informed our products. So it's really a week of just like hacking some together. I think the last one that I did, we created sort of like a day and a dynamic day and night map. So you could sort of, tweak one toggle and you could create a map that would sort of shift the color spectrum depending on the time of day. So, all kinds of interesting things you can do. And I think that's very much of a Mapbox thing, that people are interested, are very curious, and they love trying out things. I think they're also very they have many talents. So many people that I know are both brilliant designers and engineers at the same time. So they cannot just, they don't just design, but they also are able to build their own things and prototype. So yeah, it's definitely a community. Yeah, definitely also a lot of people who are not technically part of Mapbox, but still contribute a lot of important work through our sort of like public facing repositories. So yeah,
yeah, I
it's a good
imagine.
community.
I'd imagine. There's such an interesting world of sort of creative coders, and folks who don't have as much coding expertise. I saw, peeking on your portfolio, I saw that you did a little bit of processing work, and I've just sort of found P5.js and processing, and there's just this whole world of creative coding. And Hack Week sounds amazing. I'm sure you get some incredible work. That kind of leads to my next question. For folks who are within the geospatial arena who may be doing interesting Mapbox work, I'm asking a little bit for myself as well. If you're interested in sort of displaying your work, they have that great blog, that Medium blog that Mapbox has. Would you recommend, that individuals who are using Mapbox products, should we be posting our stuff on Twitter, or should we be, sending it along to someone at Mapbox to say, hey, feature our work? Just so that, there's, I feel like Esri has, the Esri conference where you can, you can feature your work, but I wonder if you'd recommend a place to feature Mapbox work.
Yeah, good question. So I can think of, I guess, multiple channels. I'd say for sure, Twitter is a great way. So if, just tag Mapbox and kind of like show us the products or the things you're building with Mapbox, I think that's, usually somebody will pick it up. So I think that's probably a really good way to do. Another thing that we've been using increasingly also for prototypes is Observable. So, I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but it's basically this platform. It's kind of like like an in-browser coding environment, but you can also visualize your work. So it's mostly used for things like D3, but you can also do GLJS, which is our JavaScript library, and you can display your work and show us the things that you build. And I think you can always also just reach out to Mapboxers directly. So we have this community called, or I guess we don't have it. I mean, it's obviously a public community. It's called the Spatial Community on Slack. So it's this Slack group where there's also a Mapbox channel. And there, I know for sure there are various Mapboxers in there. So I think that's also a great place to showcase your work if you want to, and get some feedback as well.
Yeah, fascinating. Okay, that's just helpful on a personal level. I have 2 more questions for you, and then I promise I'll let you go. I could keep you here all day. I'm obsessed with your portfolio. I'd imagine your work is fascinating. There's such a range of in-vehicle navigation providers at Mapbox, from Jaguar to Porsche. How do the different in-vehicle navigation systems differ, and is there a lot of thought given to the type of design that goes into building these navigation systems?
Yeah, so I'd say they're actually surprisingly similar. I think there are many, so I think there's one component of that, which is the hardware itself. So yes, different providers use different hardware, and that actually has a really big impact on what kind of map design you can do. So it's not like your computer or your browser where you can render pretty much anything. You might be limited by the hardware that you have in your car. So I think there's sort of like a typical setup on how things, where they're usually sort of like located in the car, and also maybe sort of a bit which sort of display if you have multiple search with purpose. So I think that's kind of the similarity, and you have to sort of design within these spatial constraints, but also within these hardware constraints. But then I think there's like another layer that's important for design, which is sort of thinking about the brand. And I think there's a lot of thought that goes into what kind of car is that, what kind of overall car design do you have, and how do you also reflect that in a map style? I mean, and I think that's maybe also the difference from other mapping providers. So we have sort of this flexibility of create any kind of map that you could imagine that really reflects all these brand colors and all these like brand requirements that you have from the provider. And there you definitely see differences, and that often results in a very different map style, even though maybe sort of like the underlying infrastructure in a sense is the same.
Fascinating. Huh. I could keep you here all day. I know I said that twice, but you've really been the highlight of my week, and it's only Monday. I have one last question for you, which I ask all of my radio interviewees, which is to describe a time where you were lost, whether that was metaphorically or in person, and how you found your way back again, given the geospatial theme of the show. And take your time also if you want to think about it.
That's a good question also for myself. Something that helps me reflect about my personal like trajectory in geospatial. I think so. I come from sort of like traditional background. I told you I come from architecture and urban design, and I think programming has always sort of like taken a bit of the backseat. So we did have some programming at our university. So it's been a while, to be fair. That might have changed in the meantime, but it wasn't as prominent as I would have hoped to, and it also wasn't as closely connected to sort of my day-to-day work. So I was kind of like missing that link between programming and design, and I kind of actively had to go out there and sort of like find it as well. And that's definitely been a period where I wasn't quite sure, do these environments even exist where you can do both, or you can do both design, spatial design, and engineering at the same time? Can they coexist in a professional environment? And yeah, I think like the first place where I've actually encountered that is at a place called the Recurse Center, which is sort of this community based out of New York City, where a bunch of people interested in programming come together and they do sort of this sabbatical, and they just build something that they're interested in, or they study something that they're interested in. And this is the first time where I sort of like met artists and programmers, also people that are really far along their career, just come together and build something creative with code. And I was really impressed by that. And that kind of like made me realize, you can build creative things. There's such a big and vast universe of creative applications out there. And through that, and I'd say that's what I also do at Mapbox now. I think I'm both a designer, but if I do want to dabble in code, if I do want to like build a tool that helps me do better design, I can do that. And sort of, yeah, the learning that this universe where you can do both kind of exists was a bit of a process, but I'm very glad that I actually found it ultimately here at Mapbox. So yeah.
That's incredible and so powerful. Also, I feel like that is probably one of the answers I most relate to as someone who definitely came from spatial design. Maybe I was more of a GIS person and I've moved towards computer science, and it always hasn't felt like, a natural fit, but, pushing myself towards that. And the creative coding makes it feel so much, not easier, but it's more fun and easier to engage with, I guess. All of these things.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Mapbox being something that really empowers that. Yeah. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's like it's kind of the same thing. And I think you can be a great designer and you can be a great engineer at the same time. So it's absolutely it's not a contradiction at all. And I think that's something I had to learn and maybe also gain a bit of confidence in it. So yeah, if you kind of like find these environments where you can do both, it'll give you the confidence to keep working on it and keep learning. And yeah.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much for your time. This has been excellent. And your final answer was probably the most relevant to my own life that I've had on this program. So I appreciate that. I hope to see you. I know Mapbox has a San Francisco office. I'll be working there next year. So I'd love to buy you coffee and pick your brain more if you're around.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, we're very remote right now. So we're kind of like spread all over the world, but there are some people in SF, unfortunately not me, but if you're ever in the New Haven area, or New York City area, that's kind of more my turf. But yeah, definitely let me know.
Will do. Thank you so much for your time, Mel. I appreciate it. This is great.